Part 1.
You will hear a telephone conversation between a man and a college receptionist. You have 30 seconds to look at questions 1 to 4.
Good morning, Clevedon College. Can I help you?
Yes, please. I'd like some information about evening courses this term.
Okay. Which subjects are you interested in?
2 subjects, actually. Languages and computer skills.
Okay. What languages are you interested in?
Actually, I'm not sure. I have to fulfill a language requirement for school, but I haven't really decided what language to study. How many language courses do you run each week?
We have 2 every night, from Monday to Friday.
I'm sorry, but would you mind going through the schedule for me?
Not at all. Monday to Wednesday are modern European languages, French, Spanish, German, Dutch, and Polish. Thursday night we offer ancient languages, Latin and ancient Greek. And on Friday we finish off with the Asian languages of Hindi and Bengali.
Monday to Wednesday, modern European, Thursday, ancient languages, and Friday, Asian. Can you spell Bengali, please?
Yes, it's B-E-N-G-A-L-I.
Great. And how much do the courses cost?
Each course costs £25 per person per term. But if you want to do 2 language courses, there's a 10% discount, but only if you book for 2 terms.
So the 10% discount is if I take 2 courses for 2 terms. Is that right?
Right.
Would it be possible for me to book my classes right now?
No, sorry, the computer's down. What I suggest you do is call extension 6994 after 6 p.m. and ask for Mrs. Johnson.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Did you say 6994 after 6 p.m.?
Yes, 6994. Please ask for Mrs. Johnson.
Thanks.
You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 5 to 10.
Okay, can we now look at the computer skills courses?
Yes, of course. Computer classes always start in the first week of the month, and the way it works is we offer 1 computer class for the entire month. So you might spend 1 month on databases, another month on Excel, and so on. Classes meet once a week on Tuesday afternoons. The next class starts February 1st.
Okay, so for the upcoming month, February...
February is going to be databases. There are 24 places still free on that course, and it costs £40 per person.
February, databases, 24 openings, £40. Okay.
Excel starts in March, and that's nearly full, only 4 slots left. It's £45.
Okay, Excel, March, only 4 slots left. Got it?
April is Outlook. That is never as popular since it costs so much more, but you get a free CD. It is £60 for the month, and there are 19 places left.
Okay, April, Outlook, £60. Is that it?
No, on the 3rd of June we start a Word course. We have 16 vacancies for that at the moment. It's also expensive, at £55.
3rd of June, Word, 16 vacancies, £55. Now, do I call the same number to book a place on one of these classes?
No, you have to call Mary Jones, I think. Yes, Mary Jones, extension 9623.
Sorry, could you repeat that number?
Yes, extension 9623. Please call her before 6 p.m.
Okay, many thanks for all your help.
That is the end of Part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 1.
Part 2.
You will hear a woman called Alice Riches talking on the radio about a scheme which involves closing streets to traffic to allow children to play. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
My guest on the show today is Alice Riches, who started the Street Play scheme where she lives in Beechwood Road. For those of you that don't already know, Street Play involves local residents closing off their street for a few hours so that children have a chance to play in the streets safely. She started it in her own street, Beechwood Road, and the idea caught on, and there are now street play schemes all over the city. So when did you actually start the scheme, Alice?
Well, I first had the idea when my oldest child was still a toddler. So that's about 6 years ago now, but it took at least 2 years of campaigning before we were actually able to make it happen. So the scheme's been up and running for 3 years now. We'd love to be able to close our road for longer, for the whole weekend, from Saturday morning until Sunday evening, for example. At the moment, it's just once a week, but when we started, it was only once a month, but we're working on it.
So what actually happens when Beechwood Road is closed?
We have volunteer wardens, mostly parents, but some elderly residents too, who block off our road at either end. The council have provided special signs, but there's always a volunteer there to explain what's happening to any motorists. Generally, they're fine about it. We've only had to get the police involved once or twice. Now, I should explain that the road isn't completely closed to cars, but only residents' cars are allowed. If people really need to get in or out of Beechwood Road, it's not a problem, as long as they drive at under 20 kilometres per hour. But most people just decide not to use their cars during this time, or they park in another street. The wardens are only there to stop through traffic.
So can anyone apply to get involved in street play?
Absolutely. We want to include all kids in the city, especially those who live on busy roads. It's here that demand is greatest. Obviously, there isn't such demand in wealthier areas where the children have access to parks or large gardens, or in the suburbs where there are usually more places for children to play outside. I'd recommend that anyone listening who likes the idea should just give it a go. We've been surprised by the positive reaction of residents all over the city, and that's not just parents. There are always a few who complain, but they're a tiny minority. On the whole, everyone is very supportive and say they're very happy to see children out on the street, even if it does get quite noisy.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
There have been so many benefits of street play for the kids. Parents really like the fact that the kids are getting fresh air instead of sitting staring at a computer screen, even if they're not doing anything particularly energetic. And of course, it's great that kids can play with their friends outside without being supervised by their parents. But for me, the biggest advantage is that kids develop confidence in themselves to be outside without their parents. The other really fantastic thing is that children get to know the adults in the street. It's like having a big extended family.
It certainly does have a lot of benefits. I want to move on now and ask you about a related project in King Street.
Right. Well, this was an experiment I was involved in, where local residents decided to try and reduce the traffic along King Street, which is the busiest main road in our area, by persuading people not to use their cars for one day. We thought about making people pay more for parking, but we decided that would be really unpopular. So instead, we just stopped people from parking on King Street, but left the other car parks open. It was surprising how much of a difference all this made. As we'd predicted, air quality was significantly better. But what I hadn't expected was how much quieter it would be, even with the buses still running. Of course, everyone said they felt safer, but we were actually amazed that sales in the shops went up considerably that day. We thought there'd be fewer people out shopping, not more.
That's really interesting. So the fact that the street was...
That is the end of Part 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 2.
Part 3.
You will hear a tutor and a student discussing a project the student is working on. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 27.
Right, Stuart. Well, I've read your draft report on your work placement at the Central Museum Association. Sounds as if you had an interesting time. So you ended up making a film for them?
Yeah, it was a film to train the employees in different museums in the techniques they should use for labelling ancient objects without damaging them. Some of them are really fragile.
Okay. So, in your report, you go through the main stages in making the film. Let's discuss that in a little more detail. You had to find a location, somewhere to shoot the film.
That took quite a few days because I had to look at different museums all over the country, but I'd allowed time for it. And even though it was the middle of winter, there wasn't any snow, so I didn't have any transport problems.
Right. Did you have to decide what equipment you'd need for the filming?
Yes, I think they were quite surprised at how well I managed that. It was just the luck of the draw, actually. I'd done that project with you last year.
Oh, on recording technology? So you knew a bit about it from that, right?
Yeah. What I found really hard was actually writing the script. I had a deadline for that, but the association had to extend it. I couldn't have done it otherwise.
Would it have helped if you'd had some training there?
I think you're right. I probably needed that, yeah.
Right. Now, from your draft report, it sounds as if you had one or two problems deciding who was going to actually appear in the video.
The casting, yeah. I'd expected that the people who worked for the association would be really keen on taking part.
But they weren't?
The thing was, they were all so busy. And it did mean some of them had to travel. But Janice King, who I was reporting to for the project, she was great. She arranged for people to have time off and for their work to be covered, so that was a big help for me.
Right. And it sounds like the filming itself went well. I gather you found a company who provided an online introduction to the techniques.
Yeah, it was really informative and very user-friendly. I learned a lot from it.
And then the editing?
For that, the association put me in touch with someone who works for one of the big movie companies, and I went down to the studio and sat with him in front of his computer for a day, learning how to cut and paste and deal with the soundtrack and so on.
So was that all?
No, I didn't include this in my draft report, but I had to design the cover for the DVD as well, the lettering and everything.
Have you done any of that sort of design work before?
No, but I did a rough draft and then talked it through with a couple of my mates, and they gave me some more ideas. And when I'd finished it, I showed it to the people who worked at the association, and they really liked it.
Excellent.
Now listen and answer questions 28 to 30.
Now, as well as your own draft report, I've also received some written evaluation from the association on the work you did during your placement, and how it was of benefit to them. I noticed that you haven't included anything on that in your report yet.
How my project benefited the association, you mean? So, do I have to include that?
Yes.
Well, let's think. I suppose if I hadn't made the film for them, they'd have had to get an outside company to do it. But because I was actually working for the association, I'd got much more of a feeling for what their aims are. Things like their responsibility for the conservation of the exhibits. I don't think an outside company would have had that understanding. They'd have been more detached.
Right. And the association also said that because of your background, you had a good idea of where to go to get the best deal for the equipment you needed. They said the saving in expense made it worthwhile, even though sourcing it took quite a bit of time.
Yes, that's true.
The association also said making the film had a very positive effect in getting staff to work together more closely.
Oh, I hadn't heard that. That's good. And certainly, people weren't afraid to tell me what they thought about it as I was making it, so I was able to get lots of feedback at every stage. That was useful for me, but it also meant the final product worked better for them.
Can you think of any other benefits?
Well, I don't think they'd really thought out what they'd do with the film once it was made. I made quite a few suggestions for the distribution, other people we could send it to, as well as museum staff.
Yes, they mentioned that. OK, good. Well, it sounds like they certainly...
That is the end of Part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 3.
Part 4.
You will hear a wildlife expert giving a talk to a group of bird lovers in the UK about a species called the tawny owl. Before you listen, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good evening, everyone. You're all likely to be familiar with pictures of the tawny owl. Because of all the owl species in the UK, it's actually the most common one. But the chances are that you're more likely to have heard one than actually seen one, as it's also strongly nocturnal. This means that it normally ventures out at night. So, what kind of habitat does the tawny owl prefer? Well, a survey carried out in the 1980s confirmed that this owl is most likely to be found in woodland. If you look at a map of tawny owl distribution across Britain, you'll only see gaps in the treeless marshy areas of eastern England and in some of the more upland parts of northwest Scotland. However, you can sometimes find populations of tawny owls in urban areas too, either in parks or in large gardens. The tawny owl shows some obvious adaptations to its natural habitat. For example, both its wings and its tail are short, which helps it to maneuver through the trees. Also, the bird's plumage is a mixture of brown and grey, and this provides suitable camouflage for when the owl perches up against a tree trunk. Then there are its large eyes. The tawny owl's visual capacities are considerably better than those of humans, and although it can't see in complete darkness, it's sufficiently well equipped to be able to navigate its way around woodland on all but the most overcast nights. Another factor that contributes to the tawny owl's success as a hunter is its excellent memory of the layout of different areas. If you combine this ability with the owl's strongly territorial and sedentary nature, most populations of tawny owl are sit-and-wait predators, you realize that it has a good opportunity to predict where prey might be found. Finally, as well as having large eyes, the owl's sense of hearing is excellent, and this helps it to locate potential prey as it sits on its perch. Turning now to the tawny owl's diet. Woodland tawny owls feed mainly on mammals, especially small ones, such as wood mice and bank voles. But they'll also take things like frogs or bats, or even fish, if they happen to be available. In urbanized landscapes, the owls seem to prey more on birds. So there are some differences there. Let's just look briefly now at survival rates in the tawny owl. Young tawny owls face a difficult time once they leave home, and 2 out of every 3 are likely to die within their first year. So, with such high mortality levels, it's a good job that established breeding pairs can produce young over a number of seasons and maximize their chances of passing their genes on to the next generation of owls. I've already mentioned the sedentary nature of the tawny owl, but it's not just adult tawny owls that are sedentary in their habits. Young birds, dispersing away from where they were born, rarely move far. The average distance is just 4 kilometres. There also appears to be some reluctance to cross large bodies of water. The owl is absent from many of the islands around our shores, with only occasional sightings in Ireland and the Isle of Wight off the south coast of England. Right, well, now I'll show you some photographs that have been taken in one or two of the
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4.